Looking at dailies for a scene that was very complicated, involved a lot of cameras. Of course, it starts with the slate, and the clapper loader guy would be there with the slate, and it'd be like, camera A, Mark, and he'd back off, and then the second camera, you'd see like, camera B, Mark. And we get to the third camera, and it's like, there's nobody there with the slate. And the camera's just panning wildly, looking for the guy. And finally, like, practically 180 degrees over, there's this guy in a yellow rain slicker. It's the second AC, and he's just got this big yellow rain hat because we had a rain machine. And he's like yelling, Mark. And I remember, it was like the worst mistake you can make as a second AC, but Abel's in the back of the screening room just going, I love this guy, I love this guy. And it was like, for him, the guy was funny and entertaining and a character, in his big yellow rain slicker with his little fisherman's hat.
I had heard a little bit about Abel as a filmmaker, but I was working with John Avildsen. We were doing a film called Neighbors, and we only had time to view a couple of reels on the flatbed. And I remember just thinking how much energy and how much snap Ms. 45 had. And then shortly after that, John had a cocktail party. Madison Avenue, 89th Street, very upscale. And I just remember asking someone next to me, who is that guy in the corner wearing a leather jacket and sunglasses? And they said, oh, that's Abel Ferrara. And I've got to meet this guy. He's doing some very interesting work. And I think that's how I got drawn into it, through the John Avildsen circle. And he came down to the set a couple times. And so that's how I met some of what was even then, this is 81, the inner circle that was already in place.
We were hippies. We participated, we were anarchists, as to use Anthony's word, but like anything went. I don't know, I guess, you had to be a part of that time. Anything went in college. We were in college, there was demonstrations going on. It was Woodstock, free children. So things were, you felt that in a sense. And then this idea of our family, the film family, as a separate family from yourself, we're very much into not being traditionalist. Most of us, no one married young and had kids young or anything like that. That was very important.
I am Jay Julian, spelled Julien. I am a lawyer. I am a theatrical producer. I have produced films as well, one of which is Abel's. And I love the business.
The first one of Abel's films that I saw was The Driller Killer. And by the way, I was absolutely convinced that the title was not The Driller Killer. I imagined that had been retitled for video. I couldn't believe that a film that was this subtle had such a crude title as The Driller Killer. And for years I tried to find out what the correct title was. But of course it was The Driller Killer.
Driller Killer, we all lived in the loft. And the actress lived there, and the DP lived there.
I got news for you. I lived there for a short while too.
We all lived there, and the
Forgot
editor.
about that.
Did he was Richard? The editor was the cook.
Not me.
No, not Anthony. This guy, he was an unbelievable cook. So we all lived there, and the DP had those bloody dogs, right? Those big dogs, and they would watch his camera equipment because I'm sure we didn't have insurance or anything. And the lights were, we'd show up at a location, and the lights were whatever the guy brought from the camera department that day, whatever he could get out. But we all lived there, and the actress, because she couldn't go anywhere because she might not come back.
There was not much money going around. And Abel had one of these, those spool tables. It's a big spool table in the loft, right? And I think it was still there until the very end. I think it was always there. And Abel was there, and he like, okay, well, Abel was like, okay, here's the deal with the money. And he took like a scrap of paper, and he wrote the number, and then he slid it across the table like this. And I looked at it, and this was the budget for the film. This was the first negotiation. And I was like, okay, it's like, I said, okay, I'll do it. It was like $250.
I mean, it was just sort of a very confused, interesting, really John Cassavetes on drugs sort of experience for all of us. The couple of incidents that I remember. Well, one was when Baby Day was hiding in the bathroom at 4 o'clock in the morning prior to shooting our dream sequence, which we were lit, and she was dressed in a diaper, and we had somebody else dressed in a bunny costume. And Baby Day refused to come out of the bathroom. Abe was begging her for hours. And finally, she burst out of the bathroom at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was on 18th Street. She burst out of the bathroom, ran down the stairs, Abe following her, and chased her with nothing but a diaper on across Union Square at 4:30 in the morning.
I was up in San Francisco with a girlfriend, and I saw that Assault on Precinct 13 was playing at this grindhouse on Market Street, right? Playing with it was this item called Driller Killer. So I said to V, Assault on Precinct 13, gotta see it. I've been wanting to see this for a long time. And there's this item, Driller Killer. Now, it sounds pretty awful, and if we don't like it, we'll walk out, fully expecting to walk out on it. So I have to sit through Driller Killer first. Here I'm seeing this funky thing, and Tony Coca-Cola, and that Buffalo, and the artist agent, and these people, and the guy with the drill, and that bum in the alley, and getting it through the forehead, and I said I had no idea it was a comedy.
Abe called me for a meeting, and at that time I was also teaching a CETA course, and my ex-wife came into New York, and both of us went to see a screening of Apocalypse Now at the Ziegfeld. And it's kind of a personally disturbing film to me because Martin Sheen plays a guy who was in my unit, my real unit in Vietnam, when of course this was the Fantasy Factory making a movie. So it was so disturbing. So we sat around, and we had a few martinis afterwards and went to Abe's, and 3 of us drank a bottle or 2 of Jim Beam, and we were talking about the next movie, which was Ms. 45. And Abe asked me to shoot it, and I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it for $1,000 a week. And he leaned across the table and he says, well, why don't I just buy you a fucking Mercedes? This led to a few words, and I ended up leaving, and we had an 8-year hiatus in our career together.
Now we flash forward, and I take Cinnamon to see Ms. 45. Cinnamon, obviously a redhead, and we go, and I see, I don't put 2 and 2 that the guy that made Driller Killer, I can't even remember the guy's name. I don't even know if there were credits on Driller Killer. I don't even know if I was there in time to see the credits. So then we see Ms. 45, right? Obviously a classic, okay? And I love this movie, right? And as we come out of the theater, Cinnamon turns to me and she says, I'd like to do that to you. So here's the funny part. I bump into another one of my girlfriends from that period, Margaret, and she said, she says, what have you been doing? And I said, oh, I've been working with this guy, Abel Ferrara. She says, I'll tell you a funny story. After you saw Ms. 45, you said to me, I could really work with this guy. And I says, that's funny because I worked on every single film after that.
It was basically the same thing. Looked at the film, sat down at the spool table, and when it got time to talk about money, because now a couple of years had passed by, and Abel had come up a little bit in the world, right? And he did exactly the same thing. He wrote the number down on the piece of paper, and he slid it across, and it was like I just looked at it, and I was like, oh shit, it's you know, it's another gig for no money. It's like, you know, I'm making some money here in the studio. I was just shaking my head. He said, that's it. And he said, in fact, we have to take, it was $1,500. He said, we have to take $900 and buy a VCR, which had just come out. It was like 1978 or 79 or something. And they weren't commercially out. People didn't have them in their homes, so they were really expensive. They were like between $800 and $900. So the budget for the music was $1,500, and we were going to spend $900 on the VCR so that we wouldn't have to sit at the Steenbeck and do it that way. We could go up to my little studio and score this thing. Right? I was just like, forget it. I said, I got to think about this. Right? So I went back and I started thinking about it. And I called Frank up, who at this point was not so much involved with making Abel's films, right? I said, look, you know, Abel is like offering me this deal. It's like, no money again. I'm going to be working for 3 months. And he said, well, what did you do? I said, well, I told him I was going to go home and think about it, you know. I basically was like walking on it. Frank was like, you get in your fucking car, go down there and tell Abel you want the gig, you know, that you're taking the gig. And this was a couple of days later now, so it's like maybe I had blown the gig with Abel. And sure enough, I went down there and there was another keyboard, somebody else's keyboard was set up there. And I was, you know, on very, very thin ice as far as the gig went. I just took Abel aside. As soon as I saw that setup, right? I said, what's going on? He said, well, this guy came in and he played a couple of things. And I said, Abel, I'm taking the gig. And he said, well, you know, what are we going to do with this guy? And I said, look, he could fetch me coffee at the fucking recording sessions, exactly like that. And Abel was like, you know, that really talked to Abel. You know, I think he really respected me. I think we kind of really hit it off at that moment. And he said, okay, and that was it, you know.
Fear City is all about Abel's relationship with his writer, Nick St. John. Tom Berenger is essentially playing Abel, and Jack Scalia is playing Nick. His character is actually called Nicky. And these two characters run an agency which provides strippers to New York clubs. And as I see it, this agency is a metaphor for Abel's cinema.
I was supposed to come in and just cut the fight scene at the end of Fear City. This confrontation between Tom Berenger and the serial killer in Fear City. And I says, okay, well, let's take a look at reel one. So I recut the whole show, and I'm trying to remember how fast I cut it. It was very fast. I may have recut the whole show in a week, saving the final confrontation in the alleyway, which was what I was originally brought in to do. And I cut that, and I cut that in a very brutal fashion.
This guy was like, went to the wall for me with big shots to get me the gig, and you know, sold them on the fact that I was talented enough to do this, right? And you know, that says a lot about Abel and, you know, this guy who has a big heart and loyalty, right? But Fear City, he couldn't push it through. So what happened was I ended up getting the songwriting gig. So we did like 6 or 8 songs, and I brought this guy David Johansen in, and we wrote a bunch of songs with him, and I think Abel and I wrote songs together on it. And Dick Halligan ended up scoring the film.
The first day I was there, it must have been what they called a Chem Junior, which was only 2 plates and a viewing screen, not a 4-plate, and a moviola, okay? Because I remember rolling down a roll of trims into a bin, and the picture had all been attached together using white sound tape. I turned to these guys and I said, okay, who did this? And you know, there they are, they're quivering, you know, Abel and Nicky. I said, this will never happen again. I says, I'll cut the show. If you want something done, you tell me and I'll do it. But now I know why this guy quit. You fuckers were cutting behind his back at night, and that's what they were doing. After that film, he was less and less involved in the editorial process. We would get, you know, I'd go over to the place with a video. output of something I'd done, and we would discuss it at his place. You know, we'd have a little macaroni, a little red wine, you know, and we would discuss it, you know. And I would make changes accordingly, you know. But he didn't want us to hover, you know. That was the only time he hovered was on Fear City, because I mean, hey, he didn't know me. I was an unknown quantity.
And then Abel started working in American television, and he did episodes of Miami Vice, which were not particularly good. And he did a pilot for Crime Story, which was actually very good. But he seemed to be one of those directors who had, you know, maybe done some interesting work early in his career, but now was going to vanish into the world of television. And then Abel started moving back into theatrical features, and he made China Girl.
China Girl was incredible. Everything about it. I mean, I'd go on location. You know, it was all around town. I'd go visit the location, the knife fight in that funky little alley, and you know, Randy, you were there. Remember? Get him! What was it? You know, whatever Russell Wong's name was. Get him!
Put him down.
Yeah. You know, it was fabulous. Okay, I mean, but everybody was so beautiful in that film. You know, I mean, all these good-looking Chinese guys, and you know, like Dave Caruso and Knucklehead Russo and Rockin' Paul G. Hip. You know, we had a cast in him in that one too.
Then King of New York came out, and you could see that he was back to doing the kind of things that he was born to do.
So what I like about Abe is that Abe, you know, once I asked him to actually block Chris Walken from going from point A to point B, turned to me and he went, "Hey, Kenny, you can't ask an actor like Chris Walken to walk like that." I said, "Well, why not?" He said, it's my choice to let the actor make the choice. So, okay, great. And so what it taught me a lot of times is can't trap these actors in light.
Let's say when Abel's on a certain track with the actors. Like I've seen it happen between he and Chris Walken, where they are just communicating. They are just seeing what the other one sees, and they just know where they're going. And it'll be like click, 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 click all day long. And then there'll be days where, say, I don't know, any given day player, actor or something just didn't get on board, didn't comprehend where he was going, and you know, and he can be extremely frustrated, you know, and vent that frustration and be like that on set. So it's really, you know, it really depends on what's happening that day, who's in the room, who's responding, who's on board, you know what I mean, and how all that's going.
What I want to make clear about this is that they were drawn to not only Abel but Christopher Walken. They wanted to work with him. They wanted to be in that scene with him, and so Abel helped me cast that, but we had a draw. There was an allure to that picture, and that really made the whole casting process easier.
I have a memory of building a practical shower. I think it was scene 1 where he's in a shower. And we built that shower actually on the roof of a building as a set, I think, and it wasn't having anything, it shot as if the Plaza Hotel suite. But it was another location. It was a set that was built to make this, you know, make the schedule happen. So there were always these partials, because of course that's part of the puzzle, is to make the day. I mean, if we're going to be shooting on Avenue B and 3rd Street, and also have to have a scene fit in that day that takes place in the bathroom of the Plaza Hotel suite, well, we can't just run all the way uptown in the same day and make that happen. So there were a lot of little partials just to make the puzzle come together.
That was always the thing with Abel. You know, if you wrote something, he was always like, you know, I'm going to have to look at this fucking film in 20 years from now, and I'm going to, you know, if I hate that song, I'm still going to hate it, you know, 20 years from now. So, you know, he didn't want anything in his film that he didn't like. And
I don't think that Christopher Walken was partial to big dialogue speeches, because in a way, you know, it was like a lot of lines to remember, a lot of opportunities to kind of trip up, and you know, it just seemed like, you know, and he had a pretty elaborate cue card system going. But what I would have to say is that the moments when he was trying to remember his line were often the most riveting moments I've ever seen on film. It was like you'd go to dailies and you'd think, you know, he'd go silent. And I knew that he was looking for the line because 2 minutes later he'd say, you know, line. But I'll bet you if you go and you watch every Christopher Walken movie and you find the really fantastic silent moments, I'll bet you half of them. I shouldn't say that, I don't know that for sure, but I think of that as a gift, that he could actually make silence and internal, you know, the wheels turning. It didn't matter that the wheels were turning to try to remember the line. It was like the wheels were turning.
Sometimes it's not so much what we put into a scene, but what we extract. And that's a lot of the work that something I learned from Abel over the course of was, let's make sure that we take out those things that might be a mistake for us. You know, when we go to a location like that in New York, you're going to find things that you don't want in the movie, rather than try to create so much to put in the movie. So we would go to a location like that and say, well, you know, those things or those articles or those dumpsters or these, that, those are the wrong color, this, that. So we would selectively say subtract rather than build in. And I mean, that's just a way to let the city be the city when it comes to some of those locations.
It's a pretty disturbingly detailed discussion that these two guys are having about the drugs and the money and, you know, the vendetta if, you know, so-and-so doesn't come through. And Chris, in one take, he just picked up this child, this like 3-year-old child who was part of the set, basically, and carried him, held him and his little teddy bear during the entire take. And of course this didn't match anything else, but he knew that, you know, you could cut away from the master before he picked up the kid, and then you'd go to his close-up, you know, or a medium shot when he picked up the kid. I mean, he definitely had an amazing mind, Chris did, for editing.
And I remember one time we were sitting around, he and this friend of mine from Italy, who was instrumental in getting the money for King of New York, and we were sitting at a restaurant having dinner, and Abel said, well, you have to excuse me, I have to go to the John. And he left and he never came back. And nobody said, so where did he go? What did he do? They just said, okay, he's not here, that's it. He went away. Now, did he frequently do that? No, I don't think so.
King of New York really introduces what would become Abel's master theme, which is the character searching for forgiveness. And I think it's an open question whether Christopher Walken's character, Frank White, actually finds forgiveness in that film. You know, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. It's very much an open question in all of the films that follow. And then, of course, he made Bad Lieutenant. It's one of the experiences in the cinema that has affected me most deeply.
Frankly, I saw the script and I thought, well, I want to do the picture. I want the production design credit. I want to work with Abel. I looked at the script and thought, oh my God, what are you going to do with this? And that's where I think the genius of a director comes out.
You know, at that time I was actually a DP. I was doing a lot of commercial stuff and was making a lot of money, but I was just bored. I got a phone call, 4 o'clock in the morning. Hello, yeah, Kenny. I said, Abe? Professionally for me, it was interesting in many ways. First of all, it was the first time that I sat down with a director and a lead, Keitel, and we decided exactly the philosophy of the movie, which was this detached camera that would sort of be non-judgmental and keep him in a medium close-up and just let him do whatever he did.
The beauty about Bad Lieutenant is it looks like a porno film, you know? There's something really sleazy about it, out of focus, and it's so funky looking, which is, of course, really works for the film, you know, it really does. I mean, the film is, you know, is incredible for that, you know.
Was it the Bad Lieutenant? Yes. I think we were on like 117th Street somewhere, some location. And we were shooting inside of an abandoned building, like a basement level. And I was coming around the corner from, I don't know, some bodega, getting something. And I see Abel, and he's about 75, 100 feet away from the crowd of the set. and this car is backing into a parking spot. And there's this like 4-year-old girl this car almost runs over. And Abel picks this girl up out of the curb, picks her up out of the way of the car that's backing into the spot, puts her on the sidewalk and says, "You all right, honey?" And he just keeps on walking. Doesn't say anything, doesn't blink, doesn't tell anybody, nothing. And I just looked at him like, and I was the only one who witnessed it. And I just looked at him like, that was just totally selfless. Totally selfless. And he says nothing.
And then what came next? I think. Then we did Body. The beautiful part about A Bad Lieutenant is we did that during the pre-production of Body Snatchers. So while they were doing, Nikki was doing a rewrite on Body Snatchers, we snuck this film in, and the deal was, I told Abel, I said, if we blow the big payday for this little crapper, that wasn't going to pay us anything, I'll kill you. And in the background, I hear Nancy Ferrara saying, and I'll kill you too.
Christmas Day that year, I got a phone call from Abe, and he said, "You're not doing it." And I didn't quite understand it, but I realized it was the next film, which was Body Snatchers. And I was really shocked, and I was really pissed, and I felt kind of betrayed. But I understood what the studio wanted Boyan, who had shot a couple of California and a few other things, to do this film. And I live with that decision, and I realized a lot of times that with a director, it's not personal.
Mary, it was nip and tuck. It was a nightmare. I know you weren't, but I'm telling you, it was the scariest. Because here I am, I'm thinking, oh shit, were you there? It was you were finishing up Bad Lieutenant. Then we did Body Snatchers, the film that wasn't the film that Warner Brothers wanted. It was very contentious all the way through. All the way through. The studio was hovering, Hakanas Chinik, the Madonna film.
Dangerous Game.
Dangerous Snake Eyes. Harvey, Jimmy Russo, and Madonna in a room.
We ended up, going to California. Before the film got organized, I ended up finding out that I wasn't even making scale, doing a $12 million film where the star was getting $4 million. And, but it was a big experience for me. And, once again, Keitel was great. I thought Madonna was actually much better as an actor than I thought she'd ever be. We had a pretty good relationship. I enjoyed working with her. Russo and I've known Jimmy. Jimmy's actually in my graduate thesis film, so I've known Jimmy for 30 years.
At the screening of the film, when we ran it for Madonna, she said, this is a quote, "Tony, where was the movie I was in?"
First cut, she loved it because it was the Madonna film. And then when it was the final cut came, and of course Abe is contracted to Final Cut, so it was pretty much untouchable. It shifted from being a Madonna movie to the Keitel movie. And it didn't go anywhere. The New York Post said the front page was Madonna movie bombs.
So she was in tears, She was in tears. She had this, like, her baseball cap on side where she's wearing the hip hop stuff, this black with the white thread. I wanted to shut the fuck up, And she gets in your ear, it's like a hot wire through your temple, I mean, and I'm in the movie, by the way, in case you guys don't know it. I'm very fine performance. I played the swinger.
Spanking scene?
Yeah, the sex scene, that Jimmy Russo plays on the videotape. I am the only editor in the history of cinema who had to cut himself down to avoid an X rating, okay?